Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. These words are attributed to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I am putting together a series of video presentations, and that phrase will be the underlying theme of this series of presentations. My name is Lou Rogers. I have spent the better part of the last 30 years working very hard to build companies that had a net worth exceeding several $1,000,000. Those companies also employed at one time over 20 people. That company is now in the hands of a receiver. And if the receiver is allowed to continue what he has done over the past year and a half, he will devastate what I have worked very hard to build over the last 30 years. It seems as though my opposition and objections I have filed with the court are falling on deaf ears. And I need your help to help me extricate my company back out of the hands of this receiver and see that justice is done. This series of presentations will drive home a very disturbing point, that our justice system, in many cases, does not allow for justice for all, especially for those of limited means. Now, what you will hear from me in this series is a true story that involves, as some of its main characters, such household names as Canon USA and Konica Minolta. Some of the other characters are some well-known banks: Roma Bank, Investors Bank, Susquehanna Bank, and some lesser-known banks, but equally important in this true story. These lesser-known banks are Liberty Bell Bank and Sterling Bank. Well, this series of stories will chronicle how these business entities came together and did business, a large volume of business, with federal, state, and local governments, as well as many colleges and universities, where we signed a contract with Canon USA back in 1993. Now, this contract had a huge upside and great opportunities. It allowed my company to do several $1,000,000 with the federal government, as well as with state and local governments and colleges and universities. At the time, my main funding source, my main bank, was Sterling Bank. It was a small bank. We enjoyed a tremendous business relationship. Because of my loyalty to them, most of my transactions were sent to them. I gave them first opportunity to fund these transactions. But there was a problem. Sterling Bank was a small bank. At the time, their legal lending limit was approximately $2 million. But as they saw my portfolio, they wanted to do more. As a matter of fact, the other banks wanted to do more as well, because they saw federal agencies, colleges, universities, Fortune 500 companies But because I wanted to bring most of this business to Sterling Bank, we had to find a way to allow for this. This is when I was introduced to a term called non-recourse funding. What this did was, even though their legal lending limit was only $2 million, and they could only loan my company up to $2 million, or whatever their legal lending limit was at the time, we set up separate loan agreements for my various customers called lessees. For example, the United States Department of Defense, U.S. Air Force, Los Angeles Unified School District, Louisiana State University. So this non-recourse facility allowed us to set up separate lines for each one of those lessees. So instead of Sterling Bank being able to loan me $2 million, they could loan me $2 million here, $2 million here, $2 million here. So we were able to fund millions of dollars under this non-recourse facility. The key to making this facility work, and it was legal, was that it was written in such a manner that the loans were not to me, it was, or to my companies, it was to my different lessees. And what made this possible to book all of these loans was the stipulation that I did not have the obligation of paying those loans. My only obligation was to pay what I received from my customer. I was to bill and collect. And if I collected, I was to remit the payment to the bank. However, as you probably know, it's not unusual for state and local governments to go 30, 60, 90 days delinquent. But even though they were going delinquent and I was not receiving the payments, I made the payments anyway, even though it was not my obligation. I did this to preserve the relationship. Example, my company received only $138,000 from LSU. But the bank took out from my account to pay the LSU debt $308,000 and change. They took out $308,000. We only collected $138,000. Again, I will stress this was done with my knowledge and with my permission. But again, it's with my understanding that eventually we're going to reconcile everything. Everyone's going to get paid, and we will have an equitable end. But it didn't happen that way. I got left holding the bag. And I'm not blaming Sterling Bank. I'm blaming the system. Sterling Bank was purchased by Roma Bank, who chose not to continue our relationship. So this escalated to the point to where in 2013, Roma Bank refused to honor a large number of checks written against my accounts at Roma Bank, even though I was owed in excess of $8 million for these non-recourse loans. Now, this not only affected my accounts at Roma Bank, it also affected my accounts at Susquehanna Bank and with Liberty Bell Bank. And you will soon see they too, both Liberty Bell Bank and Susquehanna Bank, they too are not without sin. Instead of trying to fix the problem, they decided to point all their fingers at me and my companies and left me holding the proverbial bag.